I'd walk in the changing room, and I was the only sort of non-Oxbridge boy in the changing room. Most of them were either bankers or traders, and I thought, God, I hope nobody asks me anything, because I haven't got a clue what they're talking about. I was coaching Harlequins, Middlesex, London Division, England under-20s and England B. And it was still the amateur era.
Jeez.
I think that cost me a wife as well. The following season, the only change in the squad was me. And we'd won a Grand Slam in 91. I thought, God, I'm going to get all the blame here if we don't win another Grand Slam. I then got a visit from the head bean counter, or the finance director. And he basically came into my office and he said, this has all got to stop, Dick. And I said, all what? He said, all this winning. I said, you're joking. He said, no, I'm not. He said, I've only budgeted for 15 wins in the first season. You're at 14 already, and it's not even Christmas.
Welcome to Rugby Lives, Dick. Thanks for having us in your lovely home. How's life?
Slowly decomposing, I'm enjoying myself, not working full time, just doing bits and pieces that I want to do, and it's agreeing with me.
Still involved in rugby?
I watch it from a distance. I rarely go to live games, but I love watching it on TV, despite the extortionate prices you have to pay to watch the stuff.
Are you looking after Quins? Have you got a team now, or does the fact you work for people mean that you sort of decide, you know what?
Yeah, I'm glad to be away. If I do go and watch a game, albeit an international, I enjoy sort of watching the game for what it is, and walking away and not having somebody tapping you on the shoulder and having a long discussion about the game. And you working out after 5 minutes that they don't know anything about rugby at all, and you're just like the nodding dog listening to them. So I enjoy not being involved in that, and people telling you that your job depends on the result. Really. Yeah,
because you've had a really long rugby career across, club and country as coach and a player. Like, it started with Harlequins in terms of the big leagues, but you don't come from a rugby background, do you? You're at East London.
No, I don't. I'm brought up in the East End. I was fortunate enough to learn my rugby at a school that didn't play rugby. We had a Welsh schoolmaster come in. He entered us into a seven-a-side competition in Hendon in North London, and we won it somehow by hook or by crook. We just beat everybody else up in the competition and won the games. And they did a PR job on us, and we all decided that we would go and play rugby for them. And I stayed for the duration until I was about 18, and then I left. I'd been invited to go and join Harlequins, so I was been at Harlequins for 25 years, basically.
What was Harlequins like from an East End boy?
Oh, don't you don't want to know. It was unreal. It was I'd walk in the changing room and I'd sit down, and I was the only sort of non-Oxbridge boy in the changing room, and they talk about things. Most of them were either bankers or traders or whatever, and they talk about things and they'd use great big long words. And I thought, God, I hope nobody asks me anything, because I haven't got a clue what they're talking about. And then one boy said to me one day, his name was Nick French. He was a Cambridge graduate, very bright guy, lovely guy. I think he felt sorry for me. And he said, I think you'd be better off in the other changing room. And in the other changing room, there were a few rough house players like the Claxton brothers and things like that, who were real rough diamonds. Great people. But it was a different era, different people involved in the game. And of course, the recruitment for Harlequins in those days came from the two universities.
What was it? Was there a moment when you broke through? Was there a moment when they thought, okay, this guy can play, or this guy's all right?
Well, as I say, I was 18 when I went there. I got my first game, I think, against Cardiff, and we were playing against Gareth Edwards and Barry John and those sort of players. In those days, it was like a dream come true. And Barry John, I think, sidestepped somebody and sidestepped into me, and I tackled him, and I was on the floor with him, and I thought, I've made it, I'm on the floor with the great Barry John, and as I got up, the the Welsh flanker at the time, Paul Ringer, said to me, "If you touch him again, I'll scratch your eyes out." And I said, "Well, if he sidesteps into me again, I've got to tackle him, mate. That's the way it goes." And we left it at that. And I just thought, wow, this is different to what I'm used to. And it was my first season at Harlequins, and here I am playing at an old Twickenham in front of 10,000 people against the best players in the world. So I better up my game.
What was that squad like? Tell me about the Harlequins. Which characters stand out?
The Harlequins in those days, we were pretty dismal. We'd have some really very talented players, but we'd have some people like me who weren't really up to the task in those days. And we'd get, the start of the season for us would be Cardiff, Swansea, Llanelli, Bristol, Gloucester, all back to back at Twickenham, one after another. Mm-hmm. It's like being on a Lions tour, and there were some amazing players coming to play at Twickenham. Of course, everybody coming to Twickenham would lift their game. It was a big thing for them, and for us Harlequins, it was just turning out at Twickenham, in a place that's got sort of sometimes 2,000 people watching. So it was difficult.
What was it like? Tell me the setting. What was the like of Old Twickenham?
The setting was, there were just great big stands, and the only stand that was sort of remotely full was the lower tier of the West Stand, where everybody stood and watched, because there was standing room only in those days, except for the upper tiers, which were closed off, and we'd play our games, and I'd get changed and showered and bathed in the big baths, and it was like stuff you dream of. And then you go and have something to eat, and then everyone would just disperse, and I'd walk back to the train station and get on a train and go back home. And it was just, there was no social life to speak of.
Really. Oh, really?
Yeah, it was very alien to me, because I'd come from a junior club, Hendon, where we'd hang around till sort of 11 o'clock at night, drink, play cards, socialise, go out for a curry, all that sort of thing.
Why didn't that happen there?
I don't know. I think just everybody...
Or did they just not invite you?
Well, probably. I was just a boy from a different side of the tracks to a certain extent. But there was a few of us, and I suppose we did sort of knock about it. There was a sort of a them and us scenario. But when it got rough, the boys from the other side of the tracks used to stand up, and the other fellows would run a mile. So it was an interesting, and I just thought, look, at some stage, if I stick at this and I stick at this club, I'm going to change this. I'm going to do everything I possibly can to change the whole sort of recruitment and how the way we play the game and what we do. And I even then, as a youngster, as a sort of 20-year-old, I was thinking about how you can improve and how you can improve the team and what we can do and play. So I was thinking about rugby from a very early age, really.
That's quite again, also not coming from a rugby background and coming into this Oxbridge club, and you're saying, do you know what, guys, you're all wrong.
Well, I didn't open my mouth too often in the early days, until I was sort of 21 or whatever, and I'd got a few seasons under my belt and managed to, understand what we were playing and being a worthy member of the team, which was quite important to me. But then I thought, there's so much wrong with this club. There's so many things wrong. First of all, I don't have a double-barreled name, and just little things like that. And it was bizarre. And I just thought, at some stage, I will get involved in the leadership, if you like, of this club, and I will try and change it. And I can't begin to tell you how happy I am to see the sort of the atmosphere that they have down in there. They've got a great set of supporters.
Yeah.
They're going through some tough times at the moment, but tough times don't last forever.
Yeah.
They'll come out of it. They've made some amazing appointments with people coming in to run the ship. So hopefully they'll pick up. And it's hard to watch them. Try hard and lose week in, week out. So look, it's still my club as far as I'm concerned, but it's difficult to stomach sometimes.
What was the peak of your playing days? You got a semi-final in the cup, didn't you?
What did we ever play in? I don't think we had a cup in my days, to be honest. It was just the sort of relentless fixtures, traditional fixtures that you played. I mean, the highlight for me was probably going on the Easter tour down to Wales, where we'd play Bath on a Friday, Cardiff on a Saturday, and Swansea on a Monday, and then come back. It was a tough tour.
I was say that's a beating.
Oh,
You must have got.
And those who did played golf on the Sunday, and I used to go and caddy for someone, just for a walk round to get the bruises out. But it was a tough tour. But it was a good place to sort of bond. And by that stage, when I was firmly ensconced in the team and the squad, I knew more and more people, and you understood people. I understood people a lot better. I was a bit young. I was East End yobbo, to be perfectly honest, when I first went there.
Yeah,
and I became a little bit more cultured as I sort of went to night school and learnt how to read and write.
I mean, and off the pitch, I mean, you do put yourself in situations. So you're technically at a really nice hotel working, but you're down in the basement. Tell me about what you were doing off the field around this time.
I was working in the catering industry. I think the options that I was sort of given when I left school was heating and ventilating, which I probably should have gone into. The army or the police force, or catering. And I'd always fancied food and wine, and bit
Yep.
peckish. I thought I'll go to catering and at least I'll get free meals.
Yep.
And so I started off in the catering industry and worked very, very hard and ended up becoming what they call a pâtissier. And so made cakes and pastry and all that sort of thing, and worked underground. There was no glam attached to it at all. I was just underground rolling, making pastry, making 20 kilos of puff pastry and 20 kilos of brioche pastry and 20 kilos of whatever short pastry, and making various things with them. So I was making pastes all day long, and I was rolling them out by hand. We didn't have machines in those days. So I had muscles coming out of my ears, rolling all day, every day. Which stood me in good stead, I suppose. But it became very difficult working in the catering industry and trying to play rugby at the same time. But fortunately, some bosses saw that I genuinely cared a lot about the sport, and they gave me some time off. It was a huge favouritism, and I don't know why, but they did. But in the end, I eventually had to leave.
And you also were like, a secret rugby player journalist at the same time, or is this just after this?
Well, it was.
Tell me about that.
Yeah, I got made. Eventually, I got made captain of Harlequins, and that's a story in itself. In that, I was away in Thailand on holiday, and the secretary of the club rang me and said, "We want you to be captain." And I said, "Oh, do you?" I said, "Well, I don't want to be captain. Thank you very much, and not unless you change your tune in some of the things you do in that place, and how you select things and do things." And
Was there this was a bias you felt?
well,
What
this was a them and us type of thing,
Okay.
I felt that we were like gladiators thrown out into the thing with that. There were things we'd go and play a team in Wales or whatever, and we'd travel in the morning. It was a 4-hour coach journey, and we'd get on the bus at 8 o'clock in the morning, stop somewhere for a motorway cafe for a sandwich or bacon and eggs or whatever. There was no nutrition in those days. And then we'd go off and we'd go and play Swansea, and it was another 5 hours to come back. And I said, you need to look at what you're doing. You need to go overnight. You need to go the night before, and you need to prepare and have a proper meal, and blah blah blah. And wow, how much is that going to cost? And I said, well, probably, I don't know. You work it out. 1,500 quid. Who knows?
Yeah.
But do it, approach it in a professional manner. It was like, how dare you speak to me like that? So that was anyway, the phone went dead. I couldn't care less because he'd rang my hotel room. And then 10 minutes later, my father rings me and said, I've just had the secretary of the club on. And they want you to be captain, and you're being a bit bullish about it.
How old are you at this point?
24.
Okay, so you're still living at home. Is that why you bring out?
I was in a flat. Couldn't wait to get out. I moved out at sort of 20. So I said, look, Dad, you've never even seen me play a game of rugby. You've never been to the club. You don't know what the dynamics are. You don't know anything about it. So don't get involved, please. And you don't know these people that you're talking to.
Yeah.
So tell them to stuff it.
Yeah.
And I said, he said, well, you can't, if they want you to be captain, you can't possibly stay at the club. I said, well, I don't care. I'll move. I'll go. I said, I've already been invited by London Welsh. And he said, London Welsh? He said, but we're not Welsh. I said, well, so what? Who cares? He said, no. He said, I think you should take it. Anyway, I thought about it, got back home. And then all my mates started ringing me at home and saying that, we've all voted for you. We want you to be captain, blah, blah, blah. And so, I said, well, and I went to them, and they were stuffed at this stage because it was now sort of July, pre-season training had started, and they didn't have a first team captain.
Okay.
So I had them by the short and curlies, as it were, and I made a series of demands, and they agreed to them.
As a result of being captain, that's how you got the writing gigs. Tell me about the writing gigs.
Well, I played for a bit. It was tough going at Quins. I was captain. I'd torn my ACL, so I was in plaster for like 16 weeks or whatever. And it gave me a lot of time to sort of think about the game and watch coaching and develop ideas about what we were doing. And then I got approached by the Guardian newspaper, the sports editor of the Guardian newspaper, and he said, we'd like you to write for us. And I said, well, I'm honoured. I said, but I can't write. And I genuinely, I was quite poorly educated, and I was really insecure about the whole thing. And he said, well, we're going to pay you £400 an article. And I went, whoa, happy days. Yeah, I'll do anything for that, So I started doing it, and it was tough going to start with. I had to scribble it all out on a sheet of A4, and 4 sheets of A4 equated to sort of 800 words, and I'd bash that out and via a copy taker, and it was scary times talking to the copy taker. And after about a dozen articles and that, I started to feel a bit happy about it. And then they sent me a computer. I mean, I couldn't spell computer, let alone know what to do with one. And it sat in my spare bedroom for 2 years before I knew someone who knew anything about computers to come and set it up for me and basically teach me. So that's how my sort of writing career started. And I worked for The Guardian for 9 years, which was fantastic.
That's incredible. Were you allowed to work and play at the same, or was it, could you earn money? Because that was like
well, it went into
bands for less.
It went into a trust fund, and I don't think, because it was The Guardian, and it wasn't exactly the sports paper of the year,
It doesn't count.
And poor Dudley Wood, who was the secretary of the rugby union at that time, I don't think his sort of tentacles reached as far as the Guardian.
Left-wing Guardian.
Oh, good God, man, and I sort of got away with it for a very long time. And I suppose then eventually the game went professional, and I was allowed to sort of carry on. But by which stage I'd been poached or hoodwinked into going to work for the Telegraph. So I spent a further 5 years in journalism for the Guardian, for the Telegraph, which was great fun.
But obviously, most people know you for your coaching career. How did you end up switching? Because obviously, it sounds like you were thinking coaching quite early doors. How did you eventually go from, being that outsider to then leading the way with Quins?
Well, I was at Quins. I was injured again. There was a long period where I wasn't playing, and I had a plastic bin liner over my plaster of Paris around my leg, and I was limping around watching the training in the peeing rain. And we'd played Leicester, and we'd lost. After winning 3-0 at half time, we lost 50 points to 3. Which was
that's a hell of a turnaround.
Big turnaround. I think that you could say they upped their game and we went downhill pretty rapidly. And the coach at the time at Harlequins was Dave Rollett, who's a good guy, renowned England rugby player and quite gruff and a Yorkshireman and tough and probably just what we needed. But it hurt him. That loss hurt him. And on the following Tuesday, the secretary of the club came up to me and said, I just thought you'd like to know that Dave has resigned and he's going to do tonight, Tuesday night, and he's going to do Thursday night, and that's it. And I said, no, he's not. I said, if he's going, and he's going now, and I'll do the training Tuesday. And he said, but you're on crutches. I said, I don't care. I said, I don't want somebody who's not here doing it.
So there's a lot about the power of a captain back then as well, because so often these days they seem almost slightly ceremonial.
Well, yeah, I would look. We didn't have the great band of support staff that you have in clubs today. It was the captain and the coach, and that was it. That was who ran the team, and there was a physio and a doctor and people like that coming in spasmodically. So, I went out onto the pitch and I said to Dave, I'm sorry to hear you're going. He said, yeah. He said, I'll do tonight and I'll do next Thursday. I said, no. I said, you go. You go now. He said, well, who's going to do it? I said, I'll do it. And that was the start of my coaching career, with a bin liner on my plaster of Paris leg. And we got through the training session. I thought, Christ, I need to think more about this. I need to think more about rugby, and I need to think about what we're actually doing. So, I sort of break the game up into little bits and pieces and isolate what was going on: rucks, mauls, line outs, back play, whatever. All the sort of little sequences that happen in the game. And so I started to analyse it and break it down and change my philosophy, if you like, on rugby, and then I introduced it into the coaching. So I continued that season being captain, coach, player.
Yeah.
And we had a poor start to the season. I think we by Christmas we'd hardly won a game, maybe one or two, and then it coincided with me coming back. That we recruited a few players. And we started to win a few games when we came back, and we finished the season on a good note. And then I was re-elected captain again by my so-called rugby mates, who most of them disappeared, went into the city, not to be seen again, making millions of pounds, foreign exchange broking and all that sort of thing. And they sort of left me to it. And when you get voted into something, and your mates are not around you, and you've got to really work quite hard to win everybody over, and make sure everybody knows that what we're doing is right for the team, not just for the captain, sort of thing.
What year? And so you're sort of doing coach captain role. What sort of?
81 to 83.
Okay, so when did you start? Because you obviously got to the final of the cup in '88, which was like the first major win. What was the big turning point in this? What was it? Just tell me a little bit.
After '83, after 2 years of captain, and just to give you an example of what was going on in those days, we struggled to find anybody to pick up the dirty shirts in the changing room.
Okay.
After a game.
I mean, this is Harlequins, of course.
And you expect a whole army of people to sort of line up for it, but most people were too good for that sort of thing. and so I would pick the shirts up at the end of the day, put them back in the bag. The dry cleaners or the washing machine people were nicking shirts right, left, and centre. And so I took the shirts home. And I put them in the washing machine, and I managed to break the washing machine, which was another sort of like...
I mean, they were thick, heavy cotton.
Yeah, and the wife at the time was not impressed. Why are we doing the shirts? Why is there nobody else doing them? And so that highlighted what was wrong with the club. So we needed some soldiers, really, foot soldiers, to come into the club. And we did. We managed to bring in some good people who were hugely loyal to me and to the club, and did all the dirty jobs like that. And we had a background staff, if you like. Yeah.
And how was the ground changing?
Well, the ground was a 1950s sort of athletics track with a pitch in the middle of it, and you get more atmosphere out of a speaking clock. It was just unbelievable as a place to sort of play. There was no atmosphere at all. It all dissipated around the running track, and then one day I think they got rid of the running track and they built a new stand down one side. The powers that be, and good luck to them. They've moved on. They built a stand every sort of 4 or 5 years, and turned it into the stadium which it is now. But I often used to wonder where all the money went. Because we get gates of, £2,000, £3,000, £4,000, and they weren't paying anybody in the good old amateur days. Where did the money go?
Yeah. I think that's been the question for rugby for a long time, hasn't it?
Oh yeah, I used to look at it. I used to think to myself, here am I asking to go overnight to Llanelli, stay in a hotel, the Straddy Hotel, and then walk across, play the game, get on a coach, and come back home again, and it cost £1,500. And they bleated about it, and I was just thinking, well, where's the money go?
Yeah. Never got any answers.
Never got an answer ever.
Tell me about the cup run, because the
cup was I'd left after 2 years of captaincy. I'd had it actually. My marriage had broken up on the back end of washing the shirts in our sort of broken down washer, and I sort of I took a bit of a break from the game, and then a guy called Alan Black, who was the Wasps coach. He was actually a regional rugby union development officer, and was a fantastic, charismatic guy. It was 1985, and he asked me. He said, "Would I be interested in coming and coaching Middlesex forwards for the county championship?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "Look, I'm doing nothing." I said, "But I've got limited coaching experience of sort of coaching Harlequins." And captaining them at the same time. So, look, I'm not the finished article. I said, I've never been on a coaching course, but which I have to do. I know I have to do it. And he said, yeah, you'll be all right. Come on, the crack will be good. And it was all about team building, Blackie. Anyway, we won the 1985 county championship when it was a proper competition. And I thought, pretty easy, this Coach Dark. And then the following year, I think 86, I sort of went back to Harlequins and coached one of the junior teams. I think it was the under-20s, under-21s. So I didn't walk straight back into Harlequins in any sort of big role. And then the following year, the coach at the time, who was a good friend of mine, he left. And the club asked me to coach the team. So it was 87. And then we won the cup in 88 with a fantastic brand of rugby and a fantastic group of players.
And the cup, there's like 40,000 people or something in the game there.
Well, the people, Twickenham was sold out for that particular game. All these Harlequin supporters, Christ knows where they come from, because they'd never been seen sort of on a weekly basis. And we had great support. We played Bristol in the final. Bristol were the form horses. We were the fancy Dans. Although we had some really good players, and we had people like Will Carling, Andrew Harriman, David Pears. A lot of very, very good players. We had great backs, and our forwards were a bit lightweight and shaky, but we produced some amazing tries in the game and an amazing performance. We won.
Yeah.
And it was the first thing Harlequins had ever won, in their history, and in a cup competition. So it was something to sort of to savour. And funnily enough, a group of those boys we meet every year. This year on the 15th of May, in a restaurant in Marylebone, and we sort of we celebrate the occasion.
Yeah. And what was the difference with the side, like from what you arrived to what that side was? Because obviously it still had, like you said, fancy Dans, and it wasn't like it had suddenly become this bunch of working class heroes together.
Well, we were victims of our own success, because part and parcel of the demands that I made when I first took over as captain was that we set up a recruitment group within the club that would employ or help find employment for all sorts of people. And we had a huge amount of support from the City of London in various guises: insurance, foreign exchange broking, banking, shipbroking, you name it. We had all areas covered by various people, so we were able to recruit players from up north or west or whatever.
Get farmers into the city, literally.
Well, people like Peter Winterbottom, for instance, who came down, who was allegedly I don't think he's ever spent a day farming in his life, but he came down and he went into the German bond market or whatever.
Yeah.
And we were able to help place him there, I believe, at the time, and people like Brian Moore, lots of other players benefited from the recruitment process. Of course, when the game went professional in '95, all these guys, or many of these guys, had been so successful in the city that nothing I could offer as the director of rugby of Harlequins would even get close to what they were earning in the city. Yeah. So many of them just said, I like the idea of professional rugby, but not for me, thanks. I've got a good job here. And I sort of, I try to play the card, well, who found you that job, who helped with that job? And they said, but I've got married, I'm kids, I've got other commitments now.
And then you obviously got to another final as well. So.
Well, that was in 92, was it?
91.
91, yeah, 91. And I left after that one, and we lost that. We lost to Bath in the last kick of the game. Stuart Barnes dropped a goal.
Yeah,
broke my heart, and then I left that day and went to England.
And how big a change was England? Because this was under Cook, wasn't it?
Yeah. So
how did that come out? How was that sort of meeting of minds as well?
Well, it was a long drawn out process, because after I'd sort of done my apprenticeship with Middlesex, I'd gone back to Harlequins, we were starting to get successful in '88, winning things and doing quite well in the cup competitions. I then got invited to coach London Division. We had a divisional structure, which was a brilliant, clever idea by somebody, and you had the top sort of 60 or 80 players in the country playing against each other on consecutive weekends. It was very, very smart. And we had two games lined up, one against Munster in Cork and one against Australia as the visiting touring team. And Roger Utley was the coach of the time of London, but he couldn't do it due to his commitments at Harrow's school. The headmaster wouldn't give him the time off because it conflicted with term time. And so they approached me and said, would you come and do it? And once again, I started to lay down my demands.
You've never lacked confidence, have you?
Well, I just thought, if you're going to do it, you want to be you want to be in charge of it. You want to be your own master.
Yeah.
And I said, if we do it my way. We play my way, and we throw caution to the wind. You've got two games. And we're going to throw this thing around. We're really going to kick it, and we're going to run these people off the park.
Yeah.
And the guy who became still is a very, very good friend of mine, Graham Smith, said, "Right, job's yours. You do it." He said, "I'll support you 100%," and he did, through thick and thin. So we go to Munster. Morning of the game, it's pouring down with rain in Ireland, and I'm thinking, oh shit, I've sort of committed to this running game, and really we need to be a bit more practical here. We need to kick, we need to do this, we need to do that. And of course, all the players are up for the running game. Yeah. And we've got Andrew Harriman on one wing, we've got a fella called Chris Ottey, another Nigerian, who can run like the wind on the other wing. We've got all these great backs, and we've got good forwards. I thought, sod it, let's just play, let's just run it, let's run everything. So we went out there in the pouring rain, and we ran the ball from everywhere, and we beat them by 40-odd points to very little. And we had the most amazing bonding drinking session afterwards. And then I called a training session on the Sunday morning just to prove that I was the boss. and we dragged them all out of bed, and we ran the Guinness out of them for an hour. And then they started drinking again, and they were led by a hardcore group of props, a fellow called Paul Rendell, who was basically the glue that held the thing together. And so they had a big session lunchtime. We got on a plane. We got back to Heathrow. He organised drinks in the departure lounge with the team. And so they bonded, from this Irish game and, bring on Australia in the next week or in a fortnight's time. And so we played Australia and we did the same sort of thing. We ran it at them and we scored, I think, 3 or 4 tries, and we beat them.
Yep.
And everyone went, wow. And the thing was, as far as I was concerned, I was booked for 2 games.
Yeah.
There was no money involved in it. We just needed to play. I just wanted people to play and enjoy themselves, enjoy how London teams played, Wasps and Harlequins, basically.
Yeah.
How they wanted to play. So after 2 games, I just said, like, adios, thanks a lot. Really enjoyed it. Loved it. Thank you.
Yeah.
And then Jeff Cook approached me and said, look, we're going to run an inaugural under-20s, England under-20s team. And we quite like your approach, and we'd like you to run it. And I thought, I need to be a bit careful with my demands because I'm now moving.
Tone it down a fraction.
I'm moving into uncharted water with England, and it's more than I ever sort of dreamt of.
Yeah.
But they were very kind to me, and they gave me every sort of resource that I needed.
Yeah.
In order to make it work. And we went to Romania a year later, and we beat a Romanian national team under 20s, and then we beat a Dutch national team under 20s, or full national team. And so it sort of took off. And then the following year, I was appointed England B coach. So I was coaching Harlequins, Middlesex, London Division, England under 20s, and England B, and it was still the amateur era.
Jeez.
And I think that cost me a wife as well in the measure. So it was an interesting time, and I had to be careful because a lot of the players were the same players in those different teams. A lot of them were Harlequins. A lot of them were either in the under 20s, or they were in the B team, or they were in London, or they were in Middlesex. So, in order to keep mixing up the training sessions so that they weren't all the same.
Yeah.
I had to really think about the game and think about what we were doing in terms of training.
And you came up to the main squad after the World Cup.
Yeah, they lost in the final of the Rugby World Cup 1991 because they changed their game plan, basically, the day of the day of the final, where they should have tucked it up their jumper and they'd have beaten them probably, and they didn't. But I'll never forget, I came in 92, and I remember Jeff introducing me to the squad at the Petersham Hotel. I knew most of the players anyway from the divisional and national setup. And I basically outlined what I really wanted to do in terms of the game. I needed to check. We needed to change the game. We needed to stop. We can always revert back to sticking it up our jumpers and bullying people to death. We needed to play because we've got some good players, and these fellas need to touch the ball. And of course, people like Jeremy Guscott and Will Carling were rubbing their hands, and then. As I was talking to the squad, I was looking at the forwards who weren't terribly appreciative of this, and I was while I was looking at them at the same time I was doing a bit of mental arithmetic and adding up the caps, and there was over 1,000 caps among the forwards alone, and then if I looked at the backs, there was probably another 1,000 there, so there were 2,000 caps in the room. And here am I telling them that I wanted to change the game plan, and they'd just lost the World Cup final. And of course, Brian Moore stood up as the spokesman for the forwards and said, if it's not broken, don't fix it. And I said, well, it is broken because you need it. We need to be the best in the world at the tight game when it rains, and we need to be the best in the world when it's dry, and we can use everybody. So I think we need probably 2 or 3 game plans, and we need to be the best in the world at all of them. And you need to get on board. Basically, everyone needs to get on board and buy into this. And the following season, the only change in the squad was me, and we'd won a Grand Slam in '91, and I thought, God, I'm going to get all the blame here if we don't win another Grand Slam. And so, fortunately, we did win a Grand Slam, and it was hailed. It was a great year for the team and for English rugby. And we then went into '93, which was a Lions tour, a Lions year. And I was lucky enough to get asked to go on that. So yeah,
What was it like going in the coach in that '93 tour?
Oh, it was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. I mean, I got interviewed by a group of old fuddy-duddies in Dublin, and it was, some of the questions they were asking me were from another planet. It was like, what do you think of a slush fund? One Scottish fella. And I said jokingly, I said, I'm all in favour of it, so long as I'm a recipient. It was, which went down like a lead balloon, And I was just joking. I was just trying to show my another side of me. And I thought, this is not going well. I need to toe the line here, otherwise I'm going to get overlooked. Regardless of coaching England to a Grand Slam or whatever. But it was interesting. It was a hugely interesting experience, the whole build-up to it, where we would meet Sir Ian McGeechan, myself, Jeff Cook, and we'd pan out. We'd have 3 or 4 teams penciled in, A team, B, C, D. So we'd had the top sort of 60 players in the British Isles. And there were a lot of English players in those teams, obviously. And in those days, we had a selector from each country. And the English selector was a guy called Derek Morgan, who was actually more Welsh than the Welsh selector. It was just bizarre. And we had this weird season, and we'd meet and we'd change people around in the different teams from the A, B, C teams. And it was, like any Lions tour, we can all pick the top 15. We can all probably pick the top 30, but it's the next sort of 10 or 15 players that actually makes the Lions tour. And we in those days were only allowed 30. We didn't have the luxury of 40-odd players like today. So 30 players, 2 coaches, manager, doctor, and a physiotherapist, and that was it. Five staff to do all the analysis and everything that goes with it, So it was just a bizarre sort of. We worked amazingly hard. I learnt a lot from Sir Ian. Where we played our first game and we'd won, and I'd murder a beer afterwards. And I said to him, boys are going out. You fancy going out? He said, no. He said, I'm going to sit here and watch the video. And I thought, I think that's an invitation for me to join him. So, we rarely went out on that trip, and we worked unbelievably hard, and it meant a lot to me. And I learnt a lot on the tour. It was tough. I learnt a lot about team building and bringing together 4 countries who ostensibly hate each other's guts at the start of the tour. And then by the end, these people sort of are best of friends. For the rest of their lives, probably.
Was it difficult having, because obviously you're with England, you've got a Harlequins link as well, because I think that was also the tour where, Will Carling kind of got overlooked by...
that's what happens on Lions tours. People come through, and, there was a young man, Scott Gibbs, 21 at the time, and we would train every day, train, travel, play. That was the sort of process. And this guy, Gibbs, he couldn't play cards, but by Christ, he could play rugby. And he just got better and better and better every training session. And Lions tours open your eyes up to these other players, and he got so good that I thought, oh Jesus, he's gonna be number one centre.
Mm.
And Guscott's playing well as well. What we're gonna do with Will Carling? And I think Will sensed it as well, and he didn't play that well. He was in the Wednesday side, and he struggled a bit. He was a bit homesick. He was having some problems, I think, I think his wife came out, and he wanted to go home. And Jeff Cook had to sit down and really chat it through with him. And he stayed. Fair play to him. He stayed, and he actually played well in the last game of the tour against Waikato, who were the national champions, Ranfurly Shield holders. And he stood out. He captained the side. He stood out, and he played like Will Carling can play. And I was very proud of him. The way he dealt with the downside of not being the number one player, because ever since he'd been involved with England, he'd have his own room. He didn't have to share with anybody. And all of a sudden, going on a Lions tour, he's got to share with props who burp and fart and, turn the hairdryer on at 3 a.m. in the morning when they come in and stuff like that. But it was the last amateur tour. And the moment you picked the first test side, you felt that a lot of the wind had gone out of the sails of half the squad because they weren't in the team. And no matter what you said to them or how you tried to G them up and keep them interested, their dreams had sort of gone of being in a test side against New Zealand. And some of them went off tour. Some of them enjoyed themselves and went shopping. And once players start going shopping, you've lost them, because there's exterior forces somewhere telling them to go shopping. So it was, I learned an awful lot from it, and I enjoyed it. And I came back, my God, I was so tired and exhausted. And New Zealand is exhausting as well, because everybody knows rugby. People would come up to you in the street and they'd say, "Want to talk rugby?" And you'd say, "Not really." And they'd say, "Well, what do you think about this?" And, your scrum half can't pass off his left hand. And I was like, all right, thanks. It was demanding. Very demanding, and I loved it. I loved New Zealand. I loved the people. They were very kind. But I understand New Zealand now after that tour.
And then you came back, and then there was obviously a change with England. You are now under Jack Rowell. How did that change your relationship happen? Because he's coming from,
right. Jeff. Where the whole thing started was actually 1993, where England went to play in Ireland, and we were going along very nicely, and we were in line for a third Grand Slam back to back. The trouble is, we believed it. We believed what journalists wrote about us in newspapers. We believed what people were saying in the media, and we had to do it. We had to play, and we had to do it on the field. And we went to Ireland, and we all love going to Ireland. The moment we arrived in Ireland, everyone said, "Oh God, you're so big." We had 6 or 7 boys who were over 6'6" and massive giants. And "You're so big, you're so good, you're so this. Take it easy on our boys." It was that Irish con from the moment you stepped out of Dublin Airport. It just went from there. And we believed that all we had to do is turn up. Anyway, came to the game day, and the Ireland kicked off. Tony Ward kicked off, and I mean, this thing didn't come down with ice on it. This had something from outer space. This was so high. It hung up there for an age. And the whole of Ireland, it seemed, climbed into our players, just smashed us from that moment. And up until that moment, everybody had been so nice and so polite and so friendly, and so don't take it easy on our boys, all that sort of thing. And I think we incurred 3 injuries from the kickoff.
Jeez.
And I'm looking down at this, and I could have sworn I saw the groundsman actually on the field getting involved in it. You know, it was that sort of a thing. And everyone, it was just chaos everywhere. And I thought, oh Christ, we are in for a real tough game here. And we were blown off the field in the first half. We had a quick sort of debrief at half time in the team room. Everyone was shell shocked. And at the end of the game, we lost 17-3. We were probably fortunate to get 3. We had a Lions selection meeting the following day, starting Sunday, at 8 o'clock at a hotel in Heathrow. My best friend had come to the game, had a heart attack watching the game. He was in hospital. I went to see him. Got back after the game, went to the hospital, stayed with him most of the morning, got back to the hotel 4 a.m. The sort of concierge said to me, "Oh, good night, sir," you know. I'm still in my tuxedo and everything. I go to the Lions thing, and we argue and select the Lions tour with the 4 selectors, one from each country, for 8 hours.
Wow.
8 hours. We argued and chewed the fat about this player, that player, and it went on and on and on and on. And I was hanging because I'd been up most of the night in my mate's hospital. And I thought, I can't let these buggers beat us, you know. And I was looking at Sir Ian, and he was looking at me, and I was looking at Jeff Cook, and it was like, if these people all sort of got together, and you know when you're going to struggle is when people start asking for a vote. Let's have a vote on a player. You know, you should be able to reason and talk about the longevity of the player, and you should be able to select him on his merits. But it was falling on deaf ears, and the fact that we had just lost to Ireland, and people were just pointing the finger at saying that English players were, they're getting a bit long in the tooth. And we never took a player like Jeff Probyn, who was one of the best props in the world, and we so needed a good tight head prop in New Zealand
Because of what happened in Ireland.
Yes,
Mm.
and we needed Jeff Probyn, and we needed several other players to be on that tour, which were just written off by the 4 selectors. Dare I say it? And we lost the votes on various players, and so we, at the end of it, the 3 of us, Ian, myself, Jeff, just said, "Look, this is what we've been given. It's up to us now to coach it and do the best we can."
Mm.
And we did. We tried to, and it wasn't enough. We lost 2-1.
Yeah. And how did this lead to Jeff leaving?
Well, Jeff, after that Ireland game, we went back into the sort of where the drinks were pre the dinner, the usual sort of dinner that you have after internationals in those days. And Jeff got ignored by the committee, and Jeff was on the committee, what they call the 57.
Yeah.
Jeff was completely ignored, and that really upset Jeff, because Jeff did so much for English rugby. He revolutionised it. He changed it. He brought me in to sort of help change it, and I was a small cog in the wheel. But Jeff was the brains behind a lot of things that went on, and changing people's views and outlooks on international rugby and high performance sport, and educating the committee, if you like. And they ignored him, and that really hurt him. And a couple of weeks later, we had a chat, and he said, "I'm not tolerating that. I'm not putting up with that. I'm not being treated like that by those people." He said, "So I'm going to resign at the end of the season."
Wow.
And I thought, And I said to him, is it worth me sort of trying to persuade you not to? He said, no. He said, it hurt, Dick. He said, with 2 Grand Slams, we'd lost to a better team on the day, and we did. Ireland just blew us away. And, we've learnt valuable lessons. I said, but to be treated like that after what we've done for English rugby was just the final straw. And don't forget, this was the amateur era.
Yeah, of course.
We were losing money.
Yep.
By being away. We'd meet on a Tuesday or a Wednesday night for an international. You'd have to take unpaid leave or leave from work and things like that. So Jeff moved on, and they appointed Jack Rowell, and he and I just didn't get on at all
from the start.
Whew. I mean, his first involvement really was the Tour de South Africa, where I kind of had more, apart from selection meetings, where he'd hand that over to me and Les Cusworth to pick the team and then pull holes in it. I rarely spoke to him the whole tour.
Wow. So you kind of knew your days were numbered.
Well, yeah. And what happened was I came back home from the tour, and we'd drawn the series with South Africa 1-1. We'd won in the Blue Bulls area, and we'd lost in Cape Town. And I got home, had a couple of weeks at home, and then one Sunday morning I was out presenting some prizes at a mini rugby festival, came back and saw a very nice car outside my house, and I knew it belonged to the chairman of the England coaching subcommittee, who actually was a friend of mine. And I just thought, what's he doing here? And then I walked in my house, and my wife said to me, "Oh, Graham's here, come to see you." And I looked at Graham, and Graham couldn't look me in the eye. And I just looked at him, and I just thought, and I said to him, "I know why you're here. And it's okay. I understand. I understand sport, and I understand." And he just said, "I'm sorry." And he said, sorry, about 11 times, I think. And I said, "Graham, I'm not going to take it out on you. That it just happens." And so I left. I left it at that. He went on his merry way back to Faversham. And within 2 weeks, Harlequins had been on the phone saying, "We'd like you to come as the new director of rugby and write the blueprint for the new professional era."
How did you feel about that meeting though? Like, because whilst you knew it was on the cards, because obviously you've got a big character from a big club, not your club, also importantly, coming in. So you kind of, but how did you feel? Was there a time when you thought, "Gosh, am I going to?" Because from a career point of view, being the coach of England is, the ultimate pinnacle.
Yeah, it is. No, but nobody prepares you for it. You go through a coaching pathway, if you like, and then all of a sudden you get appointed England coach, and nobody tells you what to expect or do or how to conduct yourself, or what press. You need some media training. You need this. You need that. You need to learn how to speak to people and negotiate to board meetings and things like that, or council meetings. And you need to sort of bite your tongue because you're speaking to some important people, when you can't just go around telling people what you really think all the time, because you won't last 5 minutes. So I had to bite my tongue and change. But when he was appointed, Rowell, we'd done battle against each other club-wise for many years. I don't think we'd ever spoken to each other, never said well done, or, just everybody just went their own way. And I just thought to myself, when he was appointed, I'm on borrowed time here probably. He'll want to do it all himself.
How do you look back on that period? Because you won a Grand Slam, and
Yeah, I won a Grand Slam.
On a Lions tour.
We played 17 during my tenure. We played 17, won 14.
Yeah, it's good.
You know, it was
Record.
a pretty successful record. I had a lot of fun, enjoyed it. And we set new standards, I think, for English rugby in the way we played. And I went straight from there. I didn't have time to think about it. I went straight from there back into working for Harlequins again.
And that job there as well, straight away the Harlequins, it's such a blank piece of paper. It feels like every story I've ever heard about that era is the complete Wild West. What's your best anecdote about trying to launch professionalism at a club?
Well, it was the Wild West. It was completely Wild West. And, you know, I had to recruit and contract 45 players. And I'll give you an example of how people just didn't quite buy into the whole thing. I managed to do a deal with a company, Volvo, who were looking to do a deal with the players, and so every player got a Volvo car if they wanted one within their package. And one of the players who I'd contracted was a young Turkish boy, very powerful prop. Nice kid, not the brightest thing on the planet, but nice boy. And he asked my secretary whether he could see me. And I was like, I just said to her, what does he want? Just tell him yay or nay, you know. She said, no, he wants to see you personally. So he comes and he sits down and I say, how can I help you? And he said, everyone else has got a car except me. I said, yeah. Why do you think that is? He said, I don't know. He said, I can't work it out. He said, what have I done wrong? I said, you don't have a license. You don't have a license. So I can't give you a car. I said, when you show me a license, I'll probably give you a car. Oh. If I don't get a license, he said, can I have a TV instead? And it just sort of, it summed up the whole thing to me at the time, is that people not really getting their heads around professionalism and understanding what this is about. You know, professionalism was more than just accepting money to play rugby on a Saturday afternoon for 80 minutes. It was about being able to rest, being able to train, being able to sort of look at other things in your life and improving your life, and, you know, maybe taking language lessons or whatever, or studying a trade or doing something. There's got to be more to it than just playing these video games, which was the sort of start of that era, really.
Well, how was the financial stuff work? Because obviously you mentioned earlier on that, you know, it's quite hard with some players because they're earning big money in the city. So tell me about the tiering system.
The tiering, yeah, well, there's a tiering. I mean, the tier was, if you were just an ordinary club player, your basic salary was 20,000 per year. But if you got in the match day squad to play for the first 15 versus opposition, you got £500 payment. Also, you got a win bonus of £1,000. So you had the opportunity to pick up 1,500 quid for every game you won. So if you won 4 games in a month, you know, you were looking at picking up £6,000 plus your basic salary. So it was pretty useful stuff to some people, not those in the city who were, you know, Eurobond dealers who were earning, you know, £250,000 bonus at the end of the year, you know. So you could,
and the most they could earn was in the 30s plus their
yeah,
bonus
was that, and then, you know, that was for ordinary basic club player. Then you had your international player from either Ireland, Scotland, or Wales. They were on 35 plus the same bonuses, and then if you were an England international, the moment you achieved that, you moved up into a figure of 50,000 plus the bonuses. So it was. So we believe it or not, Harlequins, that first season of professionalism, won 14 games on the bounce. What a surprise! and everyone was enjoying the success that went with it. In the first season of professional rugby, and we got some marvelous players, and recruited really well. So I then got a visit from the head bean counter, or the finance director, a Welshman called Guy Williams, lovely bloke. And he basically came into my office and he said, "This has all got to stop, Dick." And I said, "All what?" He said, "All this winning." I said, "You're joking." He said, "No, I'm not." He said, "I've only budgeted for 15 wins in the first season, and you're at 14 already, and it's not even Christmas. So what are you going to do about it?" I said, "Look, I'm employed. Everyone keeps telling me this is a performance-related sport, and I'm doing my part. So you go and find the money. Go and knock on the commercial people's door and tell them you want more money to pay the players with. But don't come here with me telling me to stop winning, because that's not what I do. Yeah. I win." He said, "Well, there's a board meeting, an emergency board meeting next week, and you're up in front of the Beak. You're." So we went to the bowels of the East India and Devonshire Sporting Club, and
of course, where else?
Where else for Harlequins? And the chairman and the secretary and there was a unanimous vote that I had to go away and change 45 contracts.
Wow. How did that go down?
And we were 6 months into the initial stage of professionalism. I've got to go back, cap in hand, to the players and just say, "Look, sorry, but we've made a mistake, and we're going to have to change the bonus structure." So basic salaries stayed the same, but the bonuses got halved, both appearance and win. And so the next 3 games, surprise, surprise, we lost. What a surprise, having just, so I had to novate, I think was the word at the time, novation, where you change somebody's contract. So I had to novate 45 contracts.
Wow.
Yeah.
How was that second half of the season overall?
We got it back on track, but we lost the first 3 games. And so there was another emergency meeting down in the bowels of East India Club where the board were sort of demanding, "What's going on?" And I said, "Well, what do you think? What's going on? You've just changed 45 people's contracts, or I've changed on your behalf 45 contracts. So there's not the same sort of financial incentive for them." "Oh, so they're just playing for money, are they?" I said, "Well, it is professionalism." Funnily enough.
So literally they are.
So yes, they are. A bit mercenary and all this sort of thing. And so there's a very strong exchange of views about it. I said, "Look, we will get it back on track. We've had a few injuries and some key people are missing." And it sort of coincided with internationals starting. So, yeah, we will get. And so with the first season of professional rugby, we should have won it. We should have won the championship or whatever. But we came 3rd.
A fascinating time to be involved, though. I mean, aside from anything else, whilst it didn't work out.
Yeah, it was Wild West, and every day was different. And I worked 7 days a week. It was full.
That's just to fit around their schedules.
Oh yeah,
got to come in and do some well with the halfbacks.
Yeah, it was, and we were playing good rugby at the end of the day, and a lot of players were getting recognised by England. So a lot of players wanted to join us, and recruitment was going well. So we had a good squad. We had a good reserve squad. We had a good pipeline of people coming in. We started to have relationships with universities. We put together a scholarship scheme with Surrey University. We were the first to do a sports scholarship. So all sorts of things for the community and things like that were falling into place. and sponsorship and the commercial stuff took off as well because we were successful.
Mm.
So it was good times, interesting times, but hard work.
And you went to London Irish pretty quickly? Was it straight after, or was
No,
there a bit of a gap?
I left. I left. I got the bullet. I got the sack from Harlequins.
Did you see that coming? Did you think that? Again, it sounded like was the writing on the wall, or
No, it was. It was. I then understood that look, you're in sport. It's about winning, and if you win, great. If you don't win, people start finding problems with what you're doing or how you're doing it. It's always someone else's fault. And if you're the head man, you take the fall for it. And I was remunerated very well for it. And so I understood and accepted the responsibility. But I had a very, very messy, nasty separation from Harlequins after 25 years as player, coach, director of rugby, start of the professional era. And we had a nasty spat for a year before we got into court, and they settled on the steps, if you like.
Oh, wow.
They took it right to the wire, and for that I'll never forgive them, because it put myself and my family, although I'd managed to save a war chest, because I always felt that something like this would happen.
Never fully trusted them.
Yeah. So I had a contingency fund to support my family, and whilst that went on, anyway, they settled, and they had to pay me. It was a decent settlement. They had to pay me over a period of time, which nearly broke them.
Yeah.
So that was that, and I left.
Did they take you to the East India Company again to get rid of you?
No.
Was there a trap door? Harlequins probably had a trap door where they just pull it. Then
it was all done
you go to the crocodiles.
Thankfully, it was all done via the solicitors, and I'd hired a really good, expensive West End lawyer employment.
So no one came to see you to say you'd been sacked?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the chief executive, I had a meeting with the chief executive, who was a part-time chief executive. He was just a guy who, his name was Donald Kerr, and he'd played, I think he played for his university fourth team at some stage, and because he'd sold his company and is worth X amount of million, he was coming to help Harlequins as a part-time CEO. And he called me in his office one day and said that there's complaints about this, there's complaints about that, there's this, there's that. It's not very good. It's not looking very good for you. And I said, what does that mean? Not looking very good for me, He said, well, we were thinking about terminating your contract. I said, well, you've seen my contract. Do you do whatever? Do what you like. I said, I'm not happy with the support that I get from you and the rest of the board. And so you want to fight? You've come to the right person. I said, I'll take you all the way to the cleaners. And then I had a meeting with the chairman who's grown up with me at Harlequins, and sadly, he was in tears. He just said, look, he said, we just think you could have done things slightly different, but at the end of the day, we're going to look after you. And I said, well, look, look after me, but if you fight me on this, I'll kill you. I'll take you all the way. And they did. They've messed around for a long time and put my kids in that. When you're paying school fees and things like that, and you're having to take your kids out of private school because you're fighting, all your money's going into paying legal fees, you start to think, well, hang on, these people they're not nice people.
Yeah, especially been involved for so long.
Why? I did 25, a quarter of a century. I'd been at this club, working with this club, and they let me down really badly. And I thought, well, sod you're not the only people in the world. And then I got an offer via a friend of mine to go to South Africa and work there for a while, and I was off, bang. So I had the most magnificent time there, and I've just got wonderful feelings about the country, and I love it. Can't wait to go back. So I came back to England eventually, and London Irish turned up at my doorstep, and they'd played 11, lost 11, and said, can you come and help? We're about to sack our coach, who was a bloke called Willie Anderson at the time. Lovely, lovely Irish character, played for Ireland, a real rebel, and a good coach, but it just hadn't worked. So I walked into London Irish, and I was the Englishman. It was a very Irish club. And it was just very different. And they, bizarrely, were still training at night.
Okay, so you were almost in exactly the same situation.
Yeah, and I took one look at it, and I just said, right, right, from Monday, we will be training at 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
And a couple of hands went up, and guy said, well, I'm at Oxford University and I can't make it.
Yeah.
I said, that's fine. Get your degree, do your best, get here when you can, but I can't pick you for the team. I didn't even know who he was.
Yeah.
And another fella said, right, I'm at Oxford as well, and I've got 7 Irish caps, and I'm the scrum half sort of thing. And I said, well, the same thing applies to you, mate. I'm so sorry, but we're training at night because of 2 people.
So strange, isn't it? What work environment? Do you not have a contract that's telling you when you should be working during the day?
Yeah.
Just rock up when you can, mate, and we'll...
So we changed. 90% of the squad applauded it and just said, oh, this is fantastic, great, we can get the work done and be home in the evenings. And so that was my first week, and we played Bristol on a Friday night at London Irish, and the players were so angry and upset at the former coach getting the sack, who was a real Irishman, and I hadn't actually even done a coaching session. I just did the team talk. Went in there.
Made such an impression.
Oh, yeah, I just did the team talk, and I just said, look, this is not about me. It's about the bloke going out the door. If you got any feelings for him, go and do it for him, and show these buggers that you can play a bit. Anyway, they beat them. They beat Bristol, and of course I was immediately treated like the king, arriving. The Messiah. I just waved my hand over it, and we changed our game plan slightly, and we started to play sensibly. And then the whole thing just needed restructuring, and the board, I wasn't a full-time member of staff, I was a consultant. So the board said to me, we want you to sort of continue next year, but we want you to, who do you want to keep? And I said, well, to be perfectly honest, a lot of the squad is not good enough to be in the Premiership, and you need to change them. And he said, well, tell me who you keep. And there was like half a dozen people, Conor O'Shea, a few other guys, those sort of people. And so they went and sacked 27 people like that. It was the worst PR man management disaster I'd ever seen in my life.
That's why you got a reputation for being a bit bullish.
It was not me. They just said, who would you prefer to keep? And I said, well, these are the people I'd like to keep. What you do with the others is up to you.
Do you miss? I mean, you're now like a fan. Do you miss being hands on with rugby? And especially as a coach, because it's it's something that stays with you.
Yeah, I miss the day in, day out coaching side of it, where you see players develop as men, as young men, and as old men, and see them understand the game and understand what they're doing, and their understanding of the values of the sport and what it brings, and seeing them grow up and mature, and seeing them become better rugby players. That used to give me enormous satisfaction. Still does. But I'm not hands-on. I'm not working with people day in, day out on that basis anymore, and I don't know if I ever will. I mean, my last coaching role was in a club called Southend, which was down in the wilderness, down the A127, where they came to me and said, look, next year's our our 125th year or centenary, and we don't want to go down. We're really struggling at the moment. We need you to, can you come in and turn it around? And in the end, being a mercenary, they succumbed to my fee, which was, when you somebody asks you to do something and you quote a stupid fee, hoping that they'll say, "Oh no, it's too much." Anyway, I charged them a lot of money and they agreed to it. And I thought, "Oh shit, I've got to do it now." So I did. And I walked in there, and for me, it was like working with 45 Jason Leonards. It was all sort of cool, blimey, Essex,
Yeah.
and everyone had an excuse, and it was always someone else's fault. And I just thought, God, and to me, it seemed like there was no point in trying to play rugby with this group of people because they weren't skillful enough. They drank too much. They socialised too much. They didn't really want to go up a league or stay in this league. I don't know what they wanted, but I just said, right, so we're not going to play rugby anymore. We're just going to kick this ball up in the air and chase it. That's how we're going to play. And we're going to play the game in the opponent's half of the field all the time. And if I catch anybody passing the ball, I'm going to take you off the field. And it was like, I could see these both smirking and laughing and all that stuff. So I said, if you don't believe me, you just try me. So first game, we go out. After 10 minutes, someone passes the ball. So I changed him. And he came off. And it was like, what? What?
Yeah.
I said, I told you, no passing. Just kick, chase, kick, chase. I said, we're not fit enough. We're not skillful enough to play any sort of rugby until we get into their 22. Then we may play. Oh. Anyway, we won the game like 11-8 or something like that. Everyone's happy. It's the first game they've won for 18 months or something. Everyone's ecstatic. So we go into the next game and more of them buy into the process of kick and chase, kick and chase, kick and chase. It wasn't rugby as we know it today, but it was effective, and it just highlighted to me that people at 11-4 couldn't catch or pass either. Thankfully. So we kick these great big up and unders and chase after them, and they drop it, and we get a scrum, and we get a penalty at the scrum because we could scrum. It's one of the few things we could do because we had 40 Jason Leonards. And we kick the goal, and then we do it again and again and again. And I was contracted or asked to stay until the end of the season. And anyway, we were safe by April. We won that many games by not playing any rugby, which was quite sad.
Feels like a fitting way to finish a coaching career.
Well, I just thought, look, stop there. You don't do, because, you're working in an environment where good, honest people are working for the club for nothing and have been for all their lives.
Yeah.
It's the core of English rugby, and they don't want money for doing it. And you feel a bit like the charlatan because you've come in and, you're accepting a big fat wedge of money for doing a job that they can't do. And I look back at it and I just think, I did a job for them, and I listened to them and I tried to help them and educate them, and they've done very well now. They've appointed a really good coach who's been with them for about 9 or 10 seasons, and they've gone up a couple of levels they've slipped down a bit and they've gone back up again. It's a vibrant junior rugby club, and it's everything that's good about the sport. You go along on a Saturday afternoon, have a few beers, something to eat, bit of banter, and it's everything that's good about rugby.
Brilliant. I feel like a fitting way to finish. Thank you very much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure listening to your stories and going back over east to east, I think is a sort of theme here. And thanks very much for your time, Dick.